Hello and welcome to Glitch Report, episode 164. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the stream of dreams, the show of shows, and everything in between. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That is linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. I am on Twitch, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube. This podcast is also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so really wherever you get your podcasts. So I'm assuming that wherever you got your podcast worked out for you in your favor because you have found this episode. We are here. It was maybe automatically downloaded to your phone, or I'm assuming I can't remember the last time I manually sought out an episode of a podcast. Usually it's just your auto subscribe, your auto download and stuff like that. Hey, you know what? Maybe you've been going through the backlog of Glitch Report episodes. You're like, yeah, I really need to go back to that time he was talking about his Lamborghini in Forza Motorsport. Really just see how that game shaped up. And I can tell you that it didn't. I think I leveled up that Lamborghini in Forza Motorsport at some point in time to like level 50, but if you're like, man, what does he think of Forza Motorsport after all this time? I don't. I don't think of Forza Motorsport. I actually think how much of a bummer that game was, and how it is probably led to a mostly Forza Horizon based Forza future for the time being. Forza Horizon 6 announced taking place in Japan. I believe that is a 2026 game. And I'm looking forward to that. I'll tell you that right now. But if you're there, if you told me, yeah, you know, whatever's left of Team 10 at Microsoft, they're cooking on another motorsport focused Forza game, I would be like, dog, you tried to reboot it once already and it didn't work, and it was pretty disastrous by all accounts. Look, Forza Motorsport is not a terrible game. It's just that it runs poorly, especially for how it looks. It is dry as a bone. Like if Forza is food, Forza Horizon is fall off the bone tenderness. It is so tender, it makes you want to throw your glasses. It just in a fit of disbelief, and disbelievement. Disbelievement? Is that that's not a word. Doesn't matter. Point is, Forza Horizon is very good, and if you haven't played 5, I don't even know what to tell you at this point. Like, what are you doing? And Forza Motorsport, yeah, you know, I leveled up that Lamborghini to level 50, and that sure did. And then I leveled up that. So I leveled up that Lamborghini to level 50. And then at some point they said, you no longer have to level up your car to get better parts. You can just spend money for all the parts that you want, but you spend more money depending on how low level your car is. So if you have a low level car and you want to make it the best car possible, you will need to spend more money on the parts, whereas you get a bigger discount with every level. And that basically just defeated the whole purpose of everything, if I am being honest. What a week. What a week. I have finished Ball Pit. I was balls deep in ball. Oh, that's terrible. Man, that's awful. Why would I say it like that? I played Ball Pit. I have emerged from said Ball Pit, finished it. I also think with a renewed sense of appreciation for that game, despite its shortcomings. Played a little bit of Outer Worlds 2. Man, I totally forgot to put those Outer Worlds 2 videos on YouTube. They're up on Twitch if you want to watch them, but I did 2 streams of the Outer Worlds 2, and that might be it for my time with Outer Worlds 2. We'll talk maybe a little bit more about that later on in the show, but boy, Outer Worlds 2 just does not do what I need or want it to do, at least as of right now. Also messed around with Ninja Gaiden 4 as well as Keeper. I've played enough of those games to have okay idea of what's going on with them and maybe how I feel about them, but that's something that we will talk about later on in the show. Let's kick things off talking about news. Nintendo Switch 2 has been a phenomenal success despite economic woes and despite, really just economic woes. I mean, it turns out economic woes impact damn near every aspect of your life, whether that be rent, whether that be medicine or food or whatever. I can understand a lot of people maybe not being in a position to buy something like a brand new game console because the rent is too damn high. That being said, the Switch 2 did have a phenomenal success. It has cleared 10 million units sold. That is more than the PS5 or PS4. The other thing to note is that the company has raised its forecast for the business year, with Switch 1 set to become Nintendo's biggest selling console ever. That, of course, was previously a title held by the Wii. So I got numbers. Let's run through these numbers. I mean, there's not like too much to say beyond the numbers themselves, but listen, there was only one console launch this year, right? Say what you will about the ROG, Xbox Ally, X-Girlfriend, whatever it's called. This was a big year, especially when it comes to console launches, despite there only being one. I am getting this news from Video Games Chronicles .com. As always, shout out to videogameschronicle.com. Nintendo Switch 2's phenomenal launch momentum continued through September with 10.36 million consoles sold in by the end of the month. That's more than the original Switch 4.7, the PlayStation 4 7.5, or PlayStation 5 7.5 million managed during their first 2 quarters on sale. However, it should be acknowledged that stock was constrained by COVID for PlayStation 5. That makes the Switch 2 comfortably the biggest console launch ever. 10.36 million compared to in 2 quarters compared to PlayStation 5's 7.8. Now, Nintendo shared their sales figures as part of its latest financial results on Tuesday. In response to the numbers, the company raised its hardware forecast for the business year up to 19 million units from 15 million units, and its operating profit up 15% to around 2.4 billion. The company said its revised forecast factored in U.S. tariff measures using the tariff rates in effect as of the end of September 2025. Now, since it launched in June 5th, 35% of Switch 2 sales have been in America, in the Americas, that is 3.68 million in Americas and 22.6% in Japan, which equates to about 2.35 million. Though the latter has been constrained by stock. If the Switch 2 hardware sales hit Nintendo's first year target of 19 million, the console will be comfortably ahead of where the original Switch was, with 14.87 million, and PS4's 13.5 million, and PlayStation 5's 13.4 million at the same stage. That is how big the Switch 2 launch has been and is looking so far. Selling over 10 million units in just the first half of the fiscal year was a major surprise that far exceeded market expectations. Toyo securities analyst Hideki Yasuda told Bloomberg, since sales in the second half of the year, which includes the Christmas shopping season, almost never fall below those of the first half, there is a strong likelihood that Nintendo will revise upward again. Now, the CEO of Japanese games industry consultancy firm Katan Games reiterated their stance that Nintendo is being overly conservative with its sales predictions for the Switch 2. This is Dr. Serkan Toto, who said, I am a bit surprised that other analysts are surprised. That's a funny way of putting it. Wasn't it always very clear that there is incredible pent-up demand for the Switch 2? I always said Nintendo will land around 20 million units at the end of their fiscal year, and that their initial 15 million forecast is typical lowballing. Now the new Pokemon game is more than enough to comfortably carry them through 2026. The only small negative point I see is the quarterly drop in digital sales year on year. Now, Nintendo's dedicated video game platform sales, which include Switch Online, downloads, amiibo, and accessories, are up 119% year on year thanks to the Switch 2's launch and its higher unit price. In software, Switch 2 launch title Mario Kart World sold in another 4 million units, taking its total to 9.57 million. World is selling at twice the rate of its best-selling predecessor, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, launch aligned, and is the Mario Kart series' biggest ever launch. That means that Mario Kart World has a 92% attach rate to the Nintendo Switch 2 hardware. However, Nintendo says that around 8.1 million of these sales were with the hardware bundles. So whether you bought the Switch 2 on its own, or like I did, bought the Switch 2 with Mario Kart World bundled with it, there is a 92% chance that you somehow own a copy of Mario Kart World, which is pretty fucking crazy if you ask me. 8.1 million of those sales, of course, being with the hardware bundles. That's bananas. Speaking of bananas, Donkey Kong Bonanza, released in July, sold 3.4 million units during the period, and Mario Kart Jamboree Switch 2 Edition managed 1.16 million units. The original Switch saw its sales forecast for the fiscal year lowered by 0.5 million to 4 million units. Switch sold another 910,000 during the 3 months ended September 30th, which represents a 60% decline compared to the same period in its last fiscal year, which makes sense. If you're going out and buying a Switch, you'll probably end up with a Switch 2 over a Switch 1. Nintendo Switch's lifetime sales now total 154.01 million units, neck and neck with Nintendo's best-selling console of all time, the Nintendo DS, which was at 154.02 million. Whew. Nintendo expects to sell another 2 million Switch consoles in the current fiscal year, bringing its lifetime total short of the best-selling console ever, the PlayStation 2, which sold 160 million consoles. Looking ahead, Nintendo's next reporting period will include the launch of Pokemon Legends ZA, which sold 6 million copies in a week when it released last month, as well as the recent Super Mario Galaxy remasters, Kirby Air Riders, which releases this month, and Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, which arrives in December. You might be having a great 2025. You might be killing it. You got a raise, a promotion, you got laid, you got something. You ain't having a better year than Nintendo. I'll tell you that right now. For a company that looked like selling Switch 2 was going to be, Switch 2 consoles was going to be like pulling teeth, they are making money hand over fist, and it is plainly obvious, just even based on the numbers alone. Pretty crazy. Speaking of crazy, Animal Crossing New Horizon, a game that originally came out on the original Nintendo Switch, is getting a Switch 2 edition and a huge free update. The Switch 2 edition will include improved visuals, mouse controls, and new features. The Switch 2 edition of the game will include Joy-Con 2 mouse controls, which can be used for redecorating your home, creating custom designs, and writing messages on the bulletin board. A new item in Nook's Cranny, the megaphone, which lets players call to other residents using the Switch 2's microphone. Expanded online features for the Switch 2 edition include support for up to 12 players as long as they all have the Switch 2 edition versus the 8 players in the standard version, as well as the Switch 2 camera support letting players show their faces alongside their characters. Now, Animal Crossing New Horizons Switch 2 edition will cost $65 US, both digitally and physically, and a paid upgrade pack will also be available for $4.99. The Switch 2 edition of the game will be coming out January 15th of 2026 alongside the free update. Let's kind of run through what is in that update while we're here. So this is in addition to the Switch 2 upgrade. The free update version 3.0 will be released on both Switch and Switch 2. It will include a new hotel on the pier run by Captain's family. They bring in guests from off the island, and players can decorate guest rooms based on various themes to make sure guests enjoy their stay. They're also including the ability for players to upgrade their home storage 2 more times, allowing them to store up to 9,000 items instead of the previous 5,000 items. A new dream location called Slumber Island will also be added, allowing players to create and decorate up to 3 of their own islands and invite players over to them without having to disrupt their main island. There will also be new collaborations added to the game featuring items based on Lego, The Legend of Zelda, and Splatoon. You'll also be able to play retro game consoles inside of Animal Crossing. However, you will need a Nintendo Switch Online subscription. After nearly 50 million copies sold, Animal Crossing New Horizons is one of the best-selling Nintendo games of all time. However, the company surprisingly ended major support for the title in 2021, just 18 months after release. It looks like they spent a lot of time not only, adding these new features as part of the free version, but also upgrading the graphics. I've never played Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm not an Animal Crossing guy. I knew people. I was around people who were playing a lot of Animal Crossing New Horizons back when that game originally came out. And the people that I was hanging out with seemed to really, really enjoy that game, though I have never played it. Maybe now is the time. We shall see. Kind of wrapping up Nintendo news here. The next Mario Galaxy movie reveal is reportedly coming very soon. That's not a lot to go off of beyond that. They're going to do a trailer for the Super Mario Galaxy movie that is going to be attached to Wicked for Good, which is in theaters November 21st. So if you're going to see Wicked for Good, I didn't see the first Wicked, so I probably should see the first before I see this new one. But the point is, there's going to be a trailer that is attached to Wicked when you go see it for the Super Mario Galaxy movie. Let's talk PlayStation. This is exciting news. Like, don't get me wrong, this is exciting news, but this is also kind of just confirming something that had already been tested and previewed for a while. After a year in beta, cloud streaming officially arrives on the PlayStation Portal today. Here's what that means. Players can now stream certain digital games from their own library. However, you will need a PlayStation Plus Premium. No, is that true? Hold on. Okay, so PlayStation Plus Premium members have already had access to cloud streaming on PlayStation Portal since November of last year. Now that feature is ready to go live, as well as the continued ability to play select games from the PlayStation Plus catalog and Classic catalog. The officially launched cloud streaming feature also adds the ability to play select digital PlayStation 5 games from the player's own library without needing to connect to their console via remote play. Now, according to Sony's full list of cloud-supported games, a total of 2,793 games from the PlayStation Store can be streamed to the PlayStation Portal via the cloud if the player already owns those games. For PlayStation Plus Premium members, a further 196 games from the PlayStation Plus catalog and 107 from the Classic catalog can also be streamed, as well as 75 free-to-play titles. Sony says the ability to use cloud streaming on Portal to play the user's own library of games makes for new possibilities beyond simply being able to stream their games on the move without having to rely on remote play, which requires their PlayStation 5 at home be turned on. So, if you are a PlayStation Portal owner you can turn off your PlayStation 5 and stream some healthy amount of games to the portal directly if you would like. We're going to take a break. When we come back, a lot of Fortnite news. I know. Imagine that. Stick around. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. I continue to be GnittWitt, and Fortnite continues to be a thing. We can now confirm that the Simpsons have arrived in Fortnite with a month-long season and a Springfield map. The Springfield Battle Pass adds premium skins like Homer, Marge, and Flanders. Stupid Flanders. According to Epic Games, new content will be added each week, offering new Simpsons-themed gameplay, shop offerings, and more. To promote each week's gameplay, narrative, and map updates, 4 original Simpsons shorts, co-produced by Grace Films and Epic Games, will be published on Disney+, Fortnite's social media channels, and the Fortnite Quest tab on November 1st, 10th, 17th, and 24th. Players who link their Epic account and their Disney account before February 28, 2026 will also get a Kang and Kodos ship as a glider. Now, I will admit, right here, right now, I have not actually loaded up this Simpsons update in Fortnite yet. However, I can confirm a couple of locations in Springfield Island that can be visited by the players. You can visit the Simpsons house, Moe's Tavern, the Quickie Mart, Krusty Burger, the Androids Dungeon and Baseball Card Shop, the Springfield Nuclear Power Plant, and Burns Manor. LEGO Fortnite players will also see Simpsons-themed event taking place in LEGO Fortnite Brick Life with Krusty Burger, seemingly trying to compete with the game's Der Burger. The arrival of the Simpsons also coincides with the arrival of sidekicks, ally pets, which can accompany the player as they play Battle Royale, LEGO Fortnite, and other modes. The first sidekick is a banana dog named Peels, will also be available as part of the Springfield Battle Pass, while other sidekicks, including Bonesy, Spike, and Lil Raptor, will be added to the Fortnite shop on November 7th. I don't know what these words mean that I'm saying either. Bonesy, Spike, and Lil Raptor. And finally, players who play Rocket League will find some Simpson-themed challenges there too, allowing them to unlock rewards such as the Blinky Topper, Homer's Hedges player banner, and Waste Wheels, as well as the ability to buy Homer's car from the shop. This is what happens when Epic owns everything. They can just put all of the Simpsons into all of their games. And god damn it, I just finished spending the last little bit of Fortnite money I had on Ghostface from Scream. And now I have to go back in and play more goddamn Fortnite. What a time to be alive. Now, you might be asking yourself, okay, well, GnittWitt, Simpsons is the present of Fortnite. What is the future? Well, Fortnite Chapter 7 could have a Hollywood theme and a Kill Bill skin, a teaser has suggested. Fortnite creators have been sent a mysterious video by Epic Games. The teaser simply shows text that says signal origin 34.134117N 118.321495W. Now playing 0 hour Chapter 7 Fortnite After Dark with Q and U. Early access, one night only, 11.19.25. Now, if you don't know, those are coordinates, which when entered into Google Maps, show the Hollywood sign, suggesting the 7th season might have a Hollywood-themed or revolve around movies in some way. The Fortnite After Dark with Q and U line also has players speculating that they could be a skin based on Quentin Tarantino's film Kill Bill, most likely the iconic yellow jumpsuit worn by Uma Thurman in Part 2 of the film. The closing credits for Kill Bill include the credit based on the characters of the bride created by Q and U, meaning Quentin and Uma, while the After Dark comment may be a reference to the extremely violent nature, and horrible language used in Quentin Tarantino's movies like Kill Bill. Yeah, fuck. I guess I gotta play more Fortnite. Like, I was like already kind of in with the Simpsons, but I like Hollywood. When are they, listen, speaking of Hollywood, when are they gonna put David Lynch into Fortnite? Like, that man loved Hollywood. That man is Hollywood as far as I'm concerned. Put David Lynch in Fortnite, you goddamn cowards. Put him in Fortnite, put like Mulholland Drive in Fortnite, put Lost Highway in Fortnite, put Grace Zabriskie from Twin Peaks and The Quarry and all sorts of stuff. Put her in Fortnite. Yeah, put Quentin Tarantino and Uma Thurman in Fortnite. I'm all for it. Put Christoph Waltz from Django Unchained in Fortnite, because you probably shouldn't put Christoph Waltz from Inglourious Bastards into Fortnite. Put Jamie Foxx in Fortnite. Put Michael Madsen in. Michael Madsen's probably already been in Fortnite, but put him in there anyways. If he's been in there before, put him in again. Put George Clooney in Fortnite from Dusk Till Dawn. Yeah. Put Jackie Brown in Fortnite. I don't know, just like, I'm assuming it's not all Put Charles Manson in Fortnite. You know, Charles Manson from the hit movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Anyways, I think there's a lot of Hollywood stuff that you could put into Fortnite. I'm surprised that they're going for something so broad, because what Fortnite has done recently is this very, very focused, narrowing in on different crossover events, such as King Kong, Snoop Dogg, Mariah Carey, Cyberpunk. Actually, I'm going to read this entire list. And this is all crossovers that happened during Chapter 6. Here we go. Godzilla, King Kong, Big Hero 6, Snoop Dogg, Mariah Carey, Cyberpunk 2077, Hatsune Miku, Star Wars, Avatar, Mortal Kombat, Cowboy Bebop, Shohei Ohtani, Sabrina Carpenter, Adventure Time, WWE, King of the Hill, Fantastic Four, Dead Mouse, Halo, Mighty Morphin, Power Rangers, Gorillas, One Punch Man, Squid Game, Beavis and Butthead, and K-Pop Demon Hunters. On top of the Simpsons event that we have going on right now. So again, very like niche to some extent in Fortnite. So I'm kind of impressed that they're going to try to tackle something that could be as broad as Hollywood. But if they're going to do Hollywood, put David Lynch in Fortnite. Let me visit David Lynch's house in Fortnite at the very least. Let's talk about things you may not be able to visit for very long. New World, the MMORPG by Amazon, is officially ending development following huge layoffs at Amazon. The MMO will remain online through 2026, but no further updates will be released. New World's recently launched Season 10 and Night Haven update, but those will serve as the final content released for the game on PCs and consoles. It was confirmed on Tuesday. The game will remain online through next year, Amazon said, and it will provide a minimum of 6 months notice before making any changes that impact your ability to play. Which to me sounds like they could cut it off middle of, like they could say, oh, in January that we're actually going to cut it off 6 months early because fuck you, they can, but they could have it go through the rest of 2026. It remains to be seen. The confirmation follows a huge round of layoffs at the corporation, said to have affected at least 14,000 jobs, including a significant number of people at New World's developer Amazon Games Orange County. Now, New World will remain available for purchase in addition to in-game currency. Players will also remain, the game will also remain available to download for PlayStation Plus subscribers. The game's Night Haven release will be made available for free. After 4 years of steady content updates and a major new console release, we've reached a point where it is no longer sustainable to continue supporting the game with new content updates. This is an update that was put out on the game's website. In the coming months, we will provide more details on what to expect and other essential information. Rest assured, our intention is to keep servers operating through 2026, allowing our community time to continue their adventures in Aeternum. Aeternum. I don't know, some bullshit fantasy place. The update continues. Your dedication and enthusiasm have made this new world adventure an unforgettable journey. We're deeply grateful for every moment you've spent helping build this extraordinary world alongside us. It's been an honor to share the world with you. Thank you for helping make this game something truly special. In a message sent to staff on Tuesday, Amazon announced it would eliminate more than 14,000 corporate jobs, many of which affect its game development and publishing businesses. That is specifically the San Diego and Irvine development studios, which are responsible for MMOs such as New World and the untitled Lord of the Rings game, which has also been canceled. I was going to talk about the Lord of the Rings game that was canceled, but it was never really announced and it's canceled and there's not too much to say. It was just, kind of rounded up with the layoffs that happened as part of the New World shutdown. After 3 years of requests, Steam Deck users will finally be able to download games with the screen off. Until now, players have had to keep their console on while downloading games and updates. Valve has updated the Steam Deck firmware with one of the most frequently requested features. Valve has added a new low-power download mode for Steam Deck, allowing it to complete active downloads in a new display off power mode. Once the downloads are complete, the handheld automatically goes into sleep mode. So it cannot download updates in sleep mode, but it will turn off the display in order to complete downloads and then go to sleep. While the handheld is downloading with the screen off, players can either press a button or move the handheld to briefly turn on any information screen showing the download status. From there, they can either keep downloading with the screen off or fully awake the handheld again. This new feature, which is currently available to Steam Deck users in the beta and preview channels, will eventually roll out to all users. This is enabled by default when the Steam Deck is plugged into a power supply. Players who also want to enable it when it's running on battery power can go into settings, power, and turn it on. You might be asking, how can it be triggered? Well, according to Valve, the new feature can be triggered in 2 ways. While the handheld is downloading content, players can press the power button to bring up a new dialog box which asks them if they want to keep downloading with the screen off. If a Steam Deck is left idle for a set time, it will also move to the low power download mode automatically. Back in November 2023, during the launch of the Steam Deck OLED model, Steam Deck product designer Lawrence Yang said the team was working on a Steam Deck 2, which would feature a next generation upgrade in power, but stressed it wouldn't be available for at least 2 or 3 years. Which to me means I should not buy a Steam Deck anytime soon. Do you remember when we talked about the Olympic teaming up with Saudi Arabia for the Olympics esports? Well, it turns out that the Olympics has ended its esports plans with Saudi Arabia after just 1 year. In a statement, the IOC said just a year after it announced a 12-year agreement with the Saudi Olympics and Paralympic Committee, the pair has decided to end their partnership following a recent review. According to the IOC, both parties are committed to pursuing their own esports ambitions on separate paths. The IOC will develop a new approach to the Olympics esports games, it said. The approach will be a chance to better fit the Olympic esports games to the long-term ambitions of the Olympic movement and to spread the opportunities presented by the Olympic esports games more widely, with the objective of having the inaugural games as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's Esports World Cup said in its own statement that it would continue pursuing its plans in the field. EWCF will continue to focus on building on the success of the Esports World Cup, the world's largest gaming and esports festival, and launching the inaugural Esports Nations Cup in November of 2026, a landmark event celebrating national pride, global competition, and community connection, it said. We remain committed to fostering an inclusive and sustainable international esports ecosystem co-created with key stakeholders around the world. EWCF will continue to collaborate with global partners to expand opportunities for players, clubs, and fans everywhere, while championing the spirit of fair play and innovation that unites traditional sport and esports alike. Saudi Arabia's public investment fund has made a series of investments in the video game industry in recent years and is central to Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's goal of making the Saudi economy less reliant from oil. The public investment fund has stakes in Take-Two and Nintendo and recently agreed to a deal to control Electronic Arts. I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to say this. Does anyone back up for a moment? Does anyone who isn't already into esports want to get into esports? Does anyone who isn't already sitting around and watching League or Dota or Fortnite or Call of Duty or Halo esports or Evo fighting game tournaments and all this stuff? Like, I know I'm painting with a broad brush because I think a lot of people who watch Evo, like the Street Fighter tournaments and stuff like that, probably could not give less of a fuck about the Dota tournaments or the League tournaments or whatever. Overwatch. I mean, esports is such a joke to me that I kept referencing the Vancouver Titans long after they stopped being a thing, but I digress. The point is that, like, is there even a world in which the people who aren't into esports could get into it? I watched a lot of baseball during the I watched a fair amount of baseball during the Toronto Blue Jays playoff run. And as I'm watching baseball, I thought to myself, yeah, I could maybe watch a little more baseball when the new season rolls around. Like, I could maybe see myself putting on a game every now and then, more so than I ever thought before during my time watching baseball up until that tournament, up until that playoff run that the Blue Jays had. I'm not saying I'm a big Blue Jays guy. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that watching enough baseball eventually made me realize that there is something about baseball worth appreciating. I have played video games for most of my life. I have seen competitive gaming. I have seen this. I've seen that. I've played fighting games. I've played shooters. I've played whatever. I have never seriously considered the idea of getting into watching esports. The only reason I watch, whatever amount of Olympic games I watch is because it's a novel thing that only happens every 2 years, right? I turn it on and I see competitive ribbon and I'm just like, okay, isn't that fun? Look at this competitive ribbon, whatever that is. Or I watch beach volleyball, or I watch, the thing where they shoot the guns. I think it's just called America, the game. No, but, you'll watch, various summer and winter activities and you're just like, yeah, that's cool. Right. And then you go about your day and, that's it. But like, I am deep in the game shit more so than I am cross-country skiing watching. And I could not give less of a shit about anything to do with the Esports World Cup or anything that the Olympic Games could possibly come up with for esports. So I'm just wondering, like, is there even a world in which, and maybe you tell me, you might be more of a sports person than me. You might be you might play more games than me. I don't know. Is there a world in which, organizations like Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund or the International Olympic Committee could make esports more of a mainstream thing? And if esports were to become more of a mainstream thing, what sort of games do you want to watch? Do you want to watch people play high-level Rocket League? Do you want to watch people play competitive Tony Hawk's Pro Skater? Like what games do you want to see? I think my initial reaction was, I guess if I'm going to watch competitive sports or competitive, if I'm going to watch esports, the thing I'm probably most likely to watch is something like a fighting game, because you can watch the life bar. It's kind of in a way looks like a competitive, like a physical competitive combat sport. Like, you can maybe wrap your mind around, like, okay, I watched these dudes play Mortal Kombat and I get it. or maybe you didn't get it. I don't know. But I really struggle to see a world in which esports becomes a mainstream thing, especially for how long they have, they going back to Quake days and all of this stuff. Like, I just don't see it happening. And I don't know if the games are in a position to attract a mainstream audience for anything beyond playing those games too. But hey, I could be wrong. Let's talk Marvel games. So Marvel, the superhero people, have kind of come out and said that, with Insomniac working on its fourth Marvel game, Wolverine, set to come out in 2026, that, Marvel is very much still in the business of working with companies to put out games, and that Marvel and Disney themselves might not be making the games. What I mean by that is that Marvel has stated that they're going to continue to work with Spider-Man, and Insomniac, Spider-Man and Wolverine developer Insomniac for many years to come. This probably means, potential opening of maybe other Sony studios working on Marvel games. I don't know. But for context, Insomniac made Spider-Man, Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2. They also are now working on Wolverine. Now, this doesn't negate other relationships, but Marvel seems pretty happy with what Sony and Insomniac have done with their brands and things like that. The reason I bring this up is because there are other, Marvel games, on the horizon. You think about a game like Marvel Cosmic Invasion, the beat 'em up game that's coming out very, very soon. When does that Cosmic Invasion game come out? I'm going to look this up on Steam, which seems like a place I can find information on video games. Marvel Cosmic Invasion, which does have a demo now, is out 1st of December. So there's a game not made by Insomniac, not made by Sony, that is coming out soon. There's also that Blade game made by the folks over at Xbox, the folks that did Prey and all of that stuff. They're working on a Arcane Studios. They're also working on a Blade game. So there are other Marvel games coming out, but it seems like the only company has found a tremendous amount of luck with that stuff has been Sony. Maybe it's because Sony's willing to put up more money, bigger risk, whatever the case may be. There's also that report that Insomniac is going to make a spin-off game focused on Venom as part of their commitment to Marvel games. But beyond that, it very much seems like Marvel is very happy with Sony, and Sony are probably going to be the most consistent developer of Marvel games for a while, though it may not be, necessarily an exclusive relationship. Monster Hunter Wilds has not done so hot. It sold a ton out of the gate, but Capcom was really banking on Monster Hunter Wilds to have a much longer tail with sales after its initial release. Now, unfortunately, sales continue to decline in Capcom's results when it comes to Monster Hunter Wilds. Wilds sold just 160,000 copies in Capcom's latest reporting period. Sales are now neck and neck with Monster Hunter World, excuse me. So, according to Capcom's results for the 3 months ended in September 30th of 2025, Wild sold just 160k units during the period. That's fewer than the previous quarter when the game sold 477,000 units, which Capcom called soft and which influenced a drop in stock price. In terms of units, Monster Hunter Wilds only barely made Capcom's top 10 for the quarter, selling fewer copies than Street Fighter VI, Devil May Cry HD Collection, and even Monster Hunter Rise. However, these games have been heavily discounted, leading to Capcom's highest ever catalog sales for the first half of a fiscal year. Overall, Wilds has been a hugely successful release for Capcom, breaking the company's launch record with a huge 10 million copies in its first month. It's also currently the best-selling game of the year in the US in terms of dollar sales, according to Circana data up to August 30th. However, the game's drop since launch has still been significant in the context of a follow-up to a 28 million unit selling Monster Hunter World. Think about that. That is kind of crazy. Worlds, which came out in 2018, was also a Capcom record at the time for 7.9 million units sold, but it regularly shipped over 1 million units in Capcom's fiscal quarters for years after launch, doubling its sales in 2 years. This was later helped by the Iceborne expansion and a 2-pack bundle. Despite a weaker launch by the time World reached the same reporting period of its own life cycle, it had sold virtually the same number of units as Wild at 10.7 million units. It's worth noting it released 1 month earlier in the year. Capcom had a slide that they published earlier this year showing annual sales up to March 2025, and that shows the remarkable sales legs of Monster Hunter World in its 7 years. Monster Hunter World has sold 28 million copies from the looks of things. Monster Hunter Wilds so far has sold 10 million copies. There is no world in which Monster Hunter Wilds catches up. They could give that game away and it wouldn't catch up. The game was very passionately played and bought by fans and did not catch on with word of mouth the way that Monster Hunter World did. I'll point out some other sales data here. Okay, so for context, the number of sales for, if I pull the data up here, the number of sales for Monster Hunter World does also include the Iceborne expansion, so they are kind of combining a bunch of stuff, but it's interesting that, like, money-wise, dollars spent, Monster Hunter Wilds is still the best-selling game in the US as of right now, with 10 million copies sold, but not necessarily enough to make it not seem like a disappointment in the eyes of Capcom. Really fascinating. Really fascinating. But listen, Capcom, like, I know this is like a pretty poor release for Capcom. Capcom is still killing it. They're still doing just fine. And I fully expect that Resident Evil 9 Requiem, especially now that it's coming out on Switch 2, will do just fine. I wouldn't worry about Capcom. Now, we talked about Resident Evil 9, and Monster Hunter and all this stuff. I want to talk about this interesting article that came across, my way a few days ago, talking about consumer spending. But consumer spending in comparison to remakes and consumer spending in comparison to remasters. This is what I find interesting. Consumers spend twice as much on video game remakes than remasters, according to research. Global spending on an average remake was more than twice that of the average remaster, according to Ampere analysis. According to research, video game remakes and remasters released across 2024 and 2025 attracted 72.4 million players across PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam, with these consumers spending some 1.4 billion on premium full games and microtransactions. So let's start there. Notably, Ampere found that across 42 titles examined, 15 of those being remakes and 27 of those being remasters, released between January 2024 and September 2025, global spending on an average remake was more than twice that of the average remaster. However, Ampere acknowledges that while the data suggests remakes can rejuvenate classic IP and attract new audiences, they do require substantially higher investments in development, marketing, and time. Remasters, by contrast, offer faster turnaround and lower cost, but generally deliver less engagement. There are some notable exceptions. According to the research, games such as the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remasters, which reached a peak $180 million in consumer spending and 7 million monthly active users across PlayStation, Xbox, and Steam. So even a game like Oblivion Remaster can be the exception to the rule when it comes to remakes versus remasters. But, and there's a chart here, Oblivion 4, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion Remastered blows away almost every game in both the remaster and remake category. But on average, it's games like Silent Hill 2 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that are full remakes that end up leading the charge on consumer spending. I guess the question I have then is like, is it because remakes tend to cost more money than remasters? Like, remasters of games are not always full price the way that remakes are almost guaranteed to be. What do you think that is? Do you think it's just the cost that, like, if people are more likely to spend money and they spend more money, that game that costs more money will make more money? That seems like a plainly obvious thing, but I don't know. Are you more likely to buy a remake or a remaster? Let's start there. Are you more likely to, spend, if you're going to get an old game, are you more likely to spend the money for a remake or spend the money for a remaster? That'd be curious to know. We're going to take another break. When we come back, we actually got some more topics to discuss before we get to the games that I've been playing. Stick around. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. I still forever remain GnittWitt, and I will always talk about video games. I got a couple of friends and family members that listen to the podcast and stuff like that, which is fun. And I'm always, kind of picking their brains and stuff like that, being like, oh, what do you think of the show? What are you playing? What do you got going on? And stuff like that. And we kind of bounce back and forth, gaming discussion, stuff like that, beyond even just the context of the show. But every now and then, someone will ask me, someone in the real world will ask me a question that I'm like, damn, this would make a good topic for the podcast. So I actually stole a couple that I would like to discuss with you right now, if I may. The first question that was kind of asked to me was, would I play a Final Fantasy game that had the same sort of turn-based combat mechanics as Expedition 33? Not necessarily like a carbon copy of what if you just took Expedition 33 but put the Final Fantasy name on it, but like that sort of interactive reaction-based combat in a Final Fantasy game. And the follow-up to that is like, do I think Final Fantasy should stick with the whole action RPG vibe that it has going on now? And I'm torn because I recognize that what Square Enix has done with Final Fantasy is try to make it more accessible to a wider variety of people. The idea being that by making Final Fantasy 16 action-based, by remaking Final Fantasy 7, you can just attract an audience of people that maybe were scared off of Final Fantasy for the longest time. What Square Enix has done with Final Fantasy by doing that is turn away a lot of, old school JRPG fans who came to Final Fantasy, originally for its turn-based combat and things like that. Now, for those of you who maybe don't know, Square Enix puts out a lot of games that aren't just Final Fantasy, and a lot of those non-Final Fantasy games that Square makes are still JRPGs. So you think about games like the Diofield Chronicles, you think about the Octopath Traveler games. There are so many games, the Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, whatever the fuck those games are called. There are so many games put out by Square Enix that are still JRPGs, but are not action based, that I think they kind of meet a lot of, just looking at a list here. Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remake just came out. Sega Frontier 2 remastered, Final Fantasy Tactics, Fantasia Neo Dimension, Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D remake, Visions of Mana, which is action based, Kingdom Hearts, which also is action based, Star Ocean, which is also action based, Live Alive, which I think is turn based. They also put out Forspoken. Like, what they've tried to do is make classic, or classically flavored turn-based RP Tactics Ogre Reborn. I could go on, but what I think Square Enix has tried to do is take those, classically flavored turn-based RPGs and maybe spin those ideas off into their own game franchises, and basically say, hey, listen, if you want the classic JRPG experience, might we recommend something like, returning to Dragon Quest, or, playing Octopath Traveler 2, something like that, right? Live Alive and Dio Field Chronicles, Triangle Strategy, that sort of thing. So I really think that what Square Enix wants to do with Final Fantasy is make it that big budget and accessible franchise for fans, while also having these more classically flavored turn-based RPGs, which is probably where I would expect to see ideas from Expedition 33 stole from and put into. Like, I think there's a world where they make some sort of smaller, more budget-focused, to some extent, classically flavored turn-based RPG that had a lot of that reactionary interactive combat from Expedition 33 in it. That's where I think that would happen. So would I play a Final Fantasy game that had those same mechanics? I just don't know if Final Fantasy ends up being the series for those sorts of ideas at this point in time. Would I play a Square Enix made game that ripped off Expedition 33? Maybe not, because I tend to lean more into the big franchises of Square Enix, like a Final Fantasy, more than I would, the other. Like, I don't even play the Dragon Quest games, which is probably the other big, Square Enix franchise that they have. So if I'm not doing that, I just don't see a world in where I end up playing a lot of, other, like, I'm not playing Bravely Default and stuff like that. Now, they could, in theory, continue to remaster, Final Fantasy games with, turn-based combat and mechanics in it, but that would still be something different from Expedition 33. So, a lot of people look at these big games that come out, like Expedition 33 or Baldur's Gate 3, and say, oh, how many people are really going to, rip off, steal from these games and further popularize these ideas and mechanics? I think the thing we have to realize is that it's really hard to capture lightning in a bottle a second time when you're not even the person who did it originally. Like, I'm not saying that like Expedition 33 does anything original or unique that's like truly groundbreaking. I would say maybe, other than just the quality of it from a small team, to some degree, I'd say the same thing about Baldur's Gate 3 of like, oh, they just did it right in a way that so many people on a budget and scale that so many people failed to accomplish, that I think it's really hard to do it a second time. Like, yes or no, would I play a Final Fantasy game that had the same mechanics as Expedition 33? Probably not. I also just don't know if it would end up being a Final Fantasy game anyways. Do I think that Final Fantasy should stick with the whole action RPG vibe? Not necessarily, but I think Final Fantasy probably will be the, unless they do full on remasters or they radically change the way they do remakes, I think Final Fantasy will be kind of that entry level, RPG series for potential new fans going forward. everybody has heard of Final Fantasy. Not everybody has played a Final Fantasy. And if they did, as of right now, there are so many Final Fantasies to choose from that I think Square Enix is trying to position Final Fantasy of, oh, if your first Final Fantasy game ends up being 16, great, we have good news for you. You can go play a game like Final Fantasy VII Remake, even if you know nothing about Final Fantasy VII and its legacy, and have a decent time based on your experience with 16. I think they're trying to create a consistency within the Final Fantasy franchise itself, and not so much with its larger JRPG, series. The other question that came up was if I thought Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 would receive higher review scores if it was a standalone game and not connected to anything. And I think my answer is no. I've not played Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, so I'm really kind of shooting in the dark here. But I think that game had a long and disastrous development process that shows in the review scores, even if you took Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 name off of the box. Like, would it score higher? Maybe 1 point higher, but I'm also of the belief that if you tell me that a video game, in your opinion, is a 9 out of 10, and I say it's an 8 out of 10, we're pretty much in agreement on that game. Like, I feel like to argue about what makes a game a 9 versus a 10 is basically splitting hairs. So do I think it would score higher? Maybe 1 point higher because of the legacy that you could ignore. But I also think that just like Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 had a pretty disastrous, long drawn out and directionless development process that led to the game that we had today that I think reflects, regardless of what your familiarity with the franchise and just by playing the game in itself. Right. Again, and I say that as someone who has not played it, but just read review scores, read reviews, followed the game's development process, watched gameplay footage. Like, to me, it feels like a game that just is a real Frankenstein's monster of a game that had to come together at some point, and what they had is just not that engaging, regardless of your familiarity with the history of that series. Let's talk about the games that I have been playing, though. I have finished Ball Pit, which has ended up being one of my favorite games of this year. But I think what makes 2025 so difficult is maybe not the right word, but so sticky for me is that so many of the games that I love or really enjoy from this year, I enjoy with some expectations. For example, I think Ball Pit is a tremendous game. Don't get me wrong, but the town building aspect of the part where you play the game outside of the main combat never got particularly good or engaging, even up until the very end of the game. So while I wholeheartedly recommend Ball Pit to almost everybody, there is like a portion of the game that just drags it down, and that continued up until the credits rolled for me. Like, I love Ball Pit. Don't get me wrong. That is a tremendous game. But I just think there's a part of it that is dragged down that makes it like weird for me to say it's one of my favorite games of 2025, right? Donkey Kong Bonanza, a game that I think overstays its welcome a little bit in the initial playthrough of the game, and also, kind of throws, platforming challenges at you that maybe you weren't expecting to be so technical based on how free-forming and free-flowing and just creative the platforming was in the game leading up until that point, right? I think about a game like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4, a game that just does not hold my attention the way that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1+2 did. Now, they do change some of the formula and some of the structure of the game, but overall, like, I think that the levels in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, I do not love the same way I do 1 and 2. It's just the right, but I still think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, like, I love Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3+4. Don't get me wrong, it was one of my favorite games of all time. But like 2025 game of the year, it's just like it's okay. Like Spider-Man 2, the caveat I would have is that it's technically not even a 2025 game because that PC version is the only version that came out this year. Everything else came out before. Assassin's Creed Shadows is a pretty good one of those. What else can I really say? So that's where I'm kind of struggling with 2025. Is like there's like a lot of games that I really enjoy, don't get me wrong, but there's this part of me that just feels like there's just enough hangups with almost everything that I don't have a nearly perfect game that maybe the way I would have last year or something like that. Speaking of not perfect, The Outer Worlds 2, man, I put maybe about 2.5, 3 hours into that game, and my biggest problem with it is that I don't think it runs very well. Like I've been playing it on like medium settings at 1080p with like DLSS balance, and I'm struggling to get like 60 frames per second on my PC, which is not great. I also don't think that game looks amazing for how poorly it runs. So it's just like one of those problems where, and this was a big problem for people who played a little game called Borderlands 4 earlier this year, or I guess not that long ago, where like graphically that game doesn't look amazing, but it performs so much worse than it should. Both Outer Worlds 2 and Borderlands 4 happen to be Unreal Engine games, so there is something in common, don't get me wrong, but man, oh man, it's just like, again, graphically, I struggle with the performance on Outer Worlds 2. Writing wise and story wise, it's okay. It's not blowing me away. In fact, I feel like the initial kind of opening of the Outer Worlds 2 is more action packed and kind of gets you into the shit. And then once you're out of that kind of initial opening story, it slows down quite a bit. It's kind of a missing persons. Oh, I'm trying to find this person, do all that stuff. And I just feel like it slows down more than I care for. So as of right now, I don't have a lot of interest in continuing the Outer Worlds 2. I would definitely give it a proper shot again if they updated the performance. But that has been my biggest problem with the game so far. But as of right now, like even if all of that stuff were to be cleared up, I haven't felt a huge connection with the Outer Worlds 2 so far. Spent a little bit of time playing a game called Ninja Gaiden 4. I think Ninja Gaiden, oh my goodness, losing my voice a little bit. I think Ninja Gaiden 4 is really cool, but to me, as a non-Ninja Gaiden expert, this game feels more like a Platinum Games game, which was, again, this game was made by Platinum. It feels more like a Platinum game than it does a Ninja Gaiden game. Like I was kind of hoping that Ninja Gaiden 4 could be the game that gets me into the Ninja Gaiden series, at least these 3D action Ninja Gaiden games. But instead, I just feel like I'm playing a Platinum game for the most part. And there's nothing wrong with playing a Platinum game. I mean, Bayonetta and Metal Gear Rising and all of those games are fantastic for the most part. But I think part of what makes Ninja Gaiden 4 less sticky for me than it could be, because I feel like there are a little too many systems going on, like almost immediately, like you have this Blood Raven mode and you have like both a dodge and a block, and which is fine. Like a dodge and a block is not a crazy idea, but like hold down your guard break, or you can do it in this different mode. Like I feel like there's slightly too many things going on at the start of Ninja Gaiden 4, which is appropriate for a Platinum game, but I feel like a Ninja Gaiden game tends to be a little bit tighter and slightly more streamlined, and the depth comes with the timing and the difficulty of a lot of those combat encounters, not the overabundance of things that you can do in it. Also mess around with Keeper, and Keeper is the game from a little known company called Double Fine, put out by Xbox. It is you play as a walking lighthouse with a bird on top of the lighthouse puzzle platformer game. And I think Keeper is gorgeous. I think there's some really cool, like stylistic things going on in the game. It's a gorgeous looking game, really crazy soundtrack. It's really cool artistic vibes in that game. The problem I run into is that with a lot of the puzzles in the game, and you might notice this with a lot of, if you play a lot of adventure games, you might notice kind of what I'm talking about here. The problem with Keeper is that coming up with the solutions for those puzzles is way more fun than actually acting out the solution in the game. So I'll sit there for a moment. I'll be like, okay, I got to turn this, I got to do this, whatever. And I figure it out. But then going through the steps of flicking the switch and turning the crank or moving the dial or activating this object or all this stuff ends up feeling so tedious after I spent that time actually figuring out what the solution is. And that might seem really damning, and I guess it kind of is, but I really bounced off Keeper once I realized that doing a lot of the gameplay mechanics involving puzzles felt more like work than like play. So I was really excited to play Keeper. I'm going to probably end up bouncing off of it. I'll keep Outer Worlds 2 installed and maybe keep my eyes peeled for any big updates in regards to performance and stuff like that. And I'll probably keep picking away at Ninja Gaiden 4. I finished Mass Effect 2. I think we talked about this on an earlier podcast. I finished Mass Effect 2. I am making my way through Mass Effect 3 as of right now. I'm still like 2 or 3 hours into Mass Effect 3. Enjoying Mass Effect 3. Hey, turns out that Mass Effect trilogy is really good. I'm actually surprised just how much better Mass Effect 3 controls and plays from a combat perspective compared to Mass Effect 2, which saw a commitment to more of a third-person shooter than a third-person RPG, with the first Mass Effect game being more RPG focused with real-time combat. That all being said, like, you know, there are games that I got cooking that I'm playing and, you know, got my eye on and all that stuff, but for now, like, I'm kind of waiting for, you know, Black Ops 7 to come out. I'm curious to see what, you know, a game like Metroid Prime 4 Dread ends up doing when it comes out. 2025 game releases as of right now, you know, we're kind of in it. I mean, we're still in it, but we're also kind of wrapping a lot of things up, right? I keep forgetting that Sacred 2 remaster is supposed to come out soon. I'm going to double check Steam and see if that's actually a real thing or if that's just a bullshit date. No, that comes out in 5 days. Shit. All right. Well, if anything, I guess I will be playing Sacred 2 when that comes out on Remembrance Day on November 11th. So might have a little bit to say about Sacred 2. They also don't have a price for it. Here's my thing. No price for Sacred 2 just yet. I'm not too sure about that game, man. Wait a minute, hold on. The definitive, okay, hold on. Vienna, Sacred 2 remaster launches November 11th of 2025 for PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. The definitive edition of the fan favorite adventure will, what? $20 on console, $20 on PC, 30 on consoles. I don't know if that's USD pricing or not, but anyways, I will play some Sacred 2. That I will say for certain. Other than that, we'll see. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 is out on the 14th, which means it will be, I won't be able to talk about it until next podcast. But anyways, there are games coming out. I'll be playing some, unless Sacred 2 Remaster gets delayed, which I guess it could because I don't think there are pre-orders for it or anything like that. But anyways, there's stuff going on. There's stuff to play. I'll keep my eyes peeled for Outer Worlds 2. I'll put out those Outer Worlds 2 videos on YouTube if you want to check those out. And I might keep messing around with Ninja Gaiden 4. I'll keep playing some Mass Effect 3. Stuff is happening. That is going to do for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree. That is linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt. I am on Twitch, Threads, TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. I'm all over the place. We'll see you all next week. Take it easy.